Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Alex, and I need to tell you about the most expensive lesson I ever learned about love, trust, and knowing when to walk away. This story is about my ex-girlfriend Megan, an empty apartment, and the moment I finally took back control of my life. If you've ever felt manipulated or taken advantage of in a relationship, you'll understand precisely why I did what I did. So buckle up, because this gets wild. Megan and I started dating about a year, and some months before everything fell apart. At first, things were absolutely perfect. She was charming, funny, and we had this incredible chemistry that made me think I'd finally found the one. We spent every moment we could together, and within just a few months, we were already talking about our future. I was completely head over heels for this woman, and I genuinely believed she felt the same way about me. About 6 months into our relationship, things between Megan and me were at their absolute best, and I couldn't imagine being with anyone else. We had already started discussing marriage seriously with actual timelines and plans. I was wholly invested in making that future happen with her. One Thursday evening, we were having dinner at my place, sitting across from each other, and Megan brought up something. Her roommate, Jessica, had just told her that she was moving out at the end of the month because she'd gotten a job offer in another state. Megan looked at me with this expression that was equal parts excited and nervous, and she said, "So I've been thinking about something. Since Jessica's leaving, and we're always complaining about not seeing each other enough because of our work schedules, why don't you move in with me?" She reached across the table and took my hand, her thumb rubbing circles on my palm the way she always did when she wanted me to really listen. "The apartment is big enough for both of us. It's got 2 bedrooms, so we'd have plenty of space. And think about how much money you'd save on rent. Plus, we'd actually get to wake up next to each other every morning instead of just on weekends." The way she presented it made complete sense to me. We both worked demanding jobs with unpredictable hours. We were constantly trying to coordinate our schedules to spend a few hours together, and it was frustrating. The idea of coming home to her every night, of not having to plan every moment we spent together, of just existing in the same space and building a life sounded perfect. Her smile was genuine and warm, her eyes were bright with hope, and I could tell she'd been thinking about this for a while. I didn't need time to think about it. I told Megan right there at dinner that I thought it was a great idea, that I'd love to move in with her. We spent the rest of that meal talking excitedly about how we'd set up the space, what our daily routines would look like, and how nice it would be to cook dinner together on weeknights instead of just grabbing takeout separately. I was genuinely excited about this new chapter. Her apartment really was lovely, too, which made the decision even easier. It was a 2-bedroom place in a safe, convenient neighborhood, close to both our jobs. The building was well maintained, and the apartment had large windows that let in tons of natural light. It was the kind of place I'd looked at when I was apartment hunting but couldn't reasonably afford on my own. The following week, I started getting everything for the move. I went to my landlord and gave him the required 30-day notice that I'd be moving out. I started packing up my stuff bit by bit, sorting through what I'd keep and what I'd donate or throw away. I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment that was significantly smaller than Megan's place, and I was already thinking about how we'd combine our things. "I'm bringing my clothes, personal items, books, and electronics, and we'll figure out the rest together." I was mentally mapping out the apartment, thinking about how we'd arrange the bedroom and whether we'd use the 2nd bedroom as an office or a guest room. That's when Megan told me something that, looking back now, should have immediately raised questions in my mind. But at the time I just took it in stride. We were at her apartment one evening, about 2 weeks before I was supposed to officially move in, when she showed me the closet space and talked about where I could put my things. She mentioned casually, almost like it was no big deal, that Jessica was taking all of her furniture and most of the appliances when she moved out. I stopped what I was doing and asked her what she meant by all of it, and she explained that basically everything in the apartment, except the major built-in appliances, belonged to Jessica. She walked me through the apartment and pointed things out. The comfortable gray couch in the living room that I'd sat on dozens of times, that was Jessica's, and it was going with her. The coffee table, the TV stand, the bookshelf, all Jessica's. the dining table, along with the 4 matching chairs. Jessica had bought that set when she first moved in, so it was leaving too. In the bedroom, the bed frame and mattress were Jessica's. The dresser and the nightstands were Jessica's. In the kitchen, Jessica had brought most of the small appliances when she moved in, including a decent set of pots, pans, and dishes. The only things that were staying were the refrigerator and the stove, which came with the apartment and were honestly both pretty old and not in great shape. I stood there in the middle of the living room, looking around and trying to process what this actually meant. It would be like moving into a brand new apartment that had never been lived in, except this one already had a lease in Megan's name and a monthly rent payment attached. I asked Megan why she didn't have any furniture of her own. She explained that when she and Jessica had first moved in together about 2 years ago, Jessica had already owned most of this stuff from her previous apartment, so they just agreed that Jessica would furnish the place. Megan would handle a bigger share of the utilities or something like that. It had worked for them, but now it meant Megan would be left with basically nothing. She seemed a little embarrassed about it, like she was worried I might change my mind about moving in because of the hassle. Here's the thing, though. I genuinely didn't see it as a problem at the time. I was so focused on the relationship and the future we were building that the practical details seemed minor. My own apartment was smaller and had come partially furnished when I moved in. The couch I had was actually the previous tenant's. He'd left it because it was too big to fit in his new place, and my landlord had just asked if I wanted to keep it rather than dealing with hauling it out. The bed frame I was using was my parents' old one they'd given me when I first moved out on my own. None of it was really mine in a meaningful way, and most of it wouldn't even fit well in Megan's bigger apartment anyway. I'd been planning to leave most of the furniture behind, regardless, because it made more sense than trying to move it. Actually, the more I thought about it, the more I started to see it the way Megan was framing it, as an opportunity rather than a problem. We'd be starting entirely from scratch, building our home together. We could pick out a couch that we both loved instead of compromising on someone's old furniture. We could choose a bed that was comfortable for both of us. We could set up the kitchen exactly how we wanted it. It felt romantic, like we were really creating something that belonged to both of us, something that represented our relationship and our shared taste. I imagined us spending weekends together at furniture stores, debating different styles and making decisions as a team. It seemed like it would be fun, actually. So when Megan and I sat down to talk about the logistics, I offered to handle furnishing the apartment. We worked it out completely fair and reasonable to me at the time. Megan's name was already on the lease from when she and Jessica first rented the place, and she'd been reliably paying her share of the rent for 2 years. The rent was $1,200 a month, which we agreed to split evenly. So we'd each pay $600. That was actually less than I'd been paying at my old place, so I was already saving money on the monthly costs alone. On top of that, I told her I'd handle buying all the furniture, the appliances we needed, and whatever else we required to make the apartment actually livable and comfortable. Megan seemed relieved and grateful when I offered this arrangement. She told me she'd been stressed about how she'd afford to replace everything Jessica was taking, and having me step in to handle it took a massive weight off her shoulders. Megan promised she'd contribute however she could, by handling the decorating or picking up smaller items here and there. It felt like we were being a team, dividing responsibilities in a way that played to our strengths and resources. She had secured the apartment with her good credit and rental history, and I had the savings and the willingness to invest in making it a real home for us. Looking back now with the clarity that only comes after everything falls apart, I can see exactly what was happening. This was the very beginning of a pattern that would define our entire living situation and ultimately our relationship. This was the first instance in which Megan positioned herself to benefit from my resources while contributing the bare minimum herself. This was the moment when the dynamic was established that I would be the one investing, providing, and building, while she would be present and reap the benefits. But I didn't see any of that then. I was in love, optimistic about our future, and genuinely believed we were partners building something together. The idea of keeping score or protecting my interests never even crossed my mind because I trusted her completely and assumed we'd be together forever. I thought I was investing in our future, not realizing I was actually funding someone's lifestyle who saw me as a resource rather than a partner. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into furnishing our new home. I'm talking about a serious investment here. I bought a beautiful leather sectional sofa that cost me nearly $2,000, a solid wood dining table with 6 chairs, a king-size bed with a premium mattress because Megan said she had back problems, a 65-inch smart TV, a complete entertainment center, and kitchen appliances, including a new refrigerator. After all, the one that came with the apartment was ancient and barely worked: a microwave, a coffee maker, a blender, and air fryer, a complete set of cookware and dishes, bedroom furniture including dressers and nightstands, lamps, decorative items, artwork for the walls, a washer and dryer set because the apartment had hookups but no machines, and even upgraded the bathroom with a new shower head and fixtures. I kept every single receipt, photographed everything as it was delivered and installed, and organized it all in a folder on my computer. I'm naturally organized like that, and I figured it would be suitable for insurance purposes anyway. By the time I was done, I had easily spent over $15,000 turning that empty apartment into a real home. But I didn't mind. Megan seemed thrilled with everything I brought in, constantly posting pictures on social media of our beautiful home, and tagging me with heart emojis and captions about how lucky she was. For those first few weeks after I moved in, everything seemed perfect. But then reality set in, and I quickly discovered that living together comes with its own unique set of challenges. The version of Megan I thought I knew began to shift, and I started to see sides of her personality that had been hidden during our initial dating phase. Minor disagreements that we could have laughed off before suddenly became major arguments. She had opinions about everything. At first, I tried to be understanding. I told myself that we were just adjusting to sharing space, that it was normal to have some friction during the transition period. But within just a few months of living together, our relationship began to deteriorate seriously, and I started to realize that what I was experiencing wasn't a customary relationship adjustment. It was controlling behavior and financial manipulation. Megan had this way of making everything about her needs, her preferences, her schedule, her comfort. If I wanted to have friends over, she'd find a reason why that particular day didn't work. If I wanted to buy something for myself, she'd say we needed to save money, even though she was constantly buying things for herself. She'd criticize how I spent my money, but somehow her spending was always justified. The financial manipulation was subtle at first, but became more evident over time. She'd suggest we go out to expensive dinners and then conveniently forget her wallet, leaving me to pay. She'd mention she was short on her half of the utilities and ask if I could cover it this month, and then the same thing would happen next month. She started treating the apartment and everything in it as if it were all hers, referring to it as my place instead of our place, even though literally everything except the 4 walls belonged to me. When her friends came over, she'd give them tours and talk about her apartment and her furniture, without ever mentioning that I'd paid for every single item they were complimenting. The controlling behavior worsened over time. She wanted to know where I was at all times, would get upset if I didn't text her back within minutes, and started making accusations whenever I spent time with my friends or family without her. She'd go through my phone when she thought I was asleep, question me about female coworkers, and create drama out of absolutely nothing. I felt like I was walking on eggshells in my own home, constantly worried about what would set her off next. The woman I'd fallen in love with had been replaced by someone I barely recognized, someone jealous, possessive, and impossible to please. For over 8 months, we battled through constant arguments and fights. I tried everything to make it work because I'm not someone who gives up easily, especially on something I'd invested so much in, both emotionally and financially. I suggested couples counseling, but she refused, saying I was the one with the problem and I should go to therapy alone. I tried having calm conversations about our issues, but she'd either shut down entirely or turn everything around to make me the villain. I tried giving her space, being more attentive, changing my behavior. Nothing worked. The apartment that was supposed to be our dream home had become a prison, and I was miserable. One Tuesday at work, I remember sitting at my desk around 4 in the evening, staring at my computer screen and feeling a heavy weight in my chest because I knew I had to go home eventually. That's what my life had become, dreading going back to my own apartment because I never knew what version of Megan I'd be walking into. Some days she'd be silent and cold, ignoring me completely and making the whole place feel like an icebox. Other days, she'd be picking fights the second I walked through the door, ready to argue about something I did or didn't do, something I said or didn't say. There was no pattern to it, no way to predict it, which somehow made it worse because I couldn't even mentally prepare. I left work around 6:30 and sat in traffic for 40 minutes. I kept thinking about what I might be walking into. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of our apartment building, it was already dark. When I finally walked through the door, I saw her immediately. Megan was sitting on the couch. I'd barely gotten 2 steps inside, my work bag still hanging off my shoulder and my keys still in my hand, when she spoke. "We need to talk," she said. Those 4 words meant another argument was coming. I've never heard anyone say "we need to talk" before delivering good news. It's always bad. I stood, still holding my keys, without even getting a chance to put my bag down, take off my shoes, or ask how her day was. She just launched right into it. "I'm breaking up with you," she said. "I think you're cheating on me." For a second, I was speechless because it was so entirely out of left field. Cheating? Me? I almost laughed out loud, and I had to bite the inside of my cheek to stop myself because I knew that would only make things worse. But it was genuinely absurd. The accusation was so far from reality that it would have been funny if it hadn't also ended my relationship. I had never cheated on Megan. Not once. Not even close. I'd never kissed another woman, never flirted with anyone, never even entertained the thought of being with someone else. Despite the fights, the control, the constant criticism, the walking on eggshells, I had stayed completely faithful to her. I'd been trying so hard to make this relationship work, putting in effort every single day. And here she was accusing me of the one thing I definitely hadn't done. I finally found my voice and asked her what she meant. "What evidence do you have?" I asked, setting my bag down on the floor, because this was clearly going to be a more extended conversation than I'd thought. "What makes you think I'm cheating?" I genuinely wanted to know what had led her to this conclusion because, from my perspective, I'd done nothing wrong. There was literally nothing to suggest infidelity because there was no infidelity happening. But Megan couldn't give me anything solid. She started listing off these vague, meaningless observations that didn't prove anything. "You've been distant lately," she said, which was true, but not because of another woman. I'd been distant because living with her had become exhausting, and I was emotionally drained. "You're always on your phone," she continued, which wasn't even accurate. I used my phone a normal amount, primarily for work emails and scrolling through news or sports updates. "The other day, you smiled at a text message," she added, like that was some kind of smoking gun. I don't even remember the moment she was talking about. As she kept talking, throwing out these weak accusations that didn't add up to anything, something clicked in my brain. I could see it clearly now. She didn't actually believe I was cheating. This wasn't about infidelity at all. This was her exit strategy. She wanted out of the relationship, but didn't want to be the bad guy. So she created a narrative in which I was the cheater, and she was the victim. That way, she could tell her friends and family that she had to break up with me because I betrayed her, and everyone would sympathize with her and think I was terrible. She'd get to be the wounded party instead of just the person who ended things. Maybe she'd met someone new and wanted to be free to pursue that without guilt. Perhaps she was just bored with me and wanted something different. Maybe she'd been planning this for weeks and was waiting for the right moment. I didn't know her real reasons, and in that moment, standing in that living room, I realized something important. I didn't care anymore. Here's the truth that I understood right then. I was tired. Bone deep, soul level tired. For 8 months, I'd been dealing with Megan's need to control every aspect of my life. She'd made me feel like nothing I did was ever right, like I was constantly failing some test I didn't know I was taking. Living with her hadn't brought us closer together as I'd hoped. It had revealed sides of her personality that I couldn't live with long term. The woman I'd fallen in love with, the one who'd been fun and easygoing during our first few months of dating, had disappeared completely. In her place was someone who sucked the joy out of everything, who turned every minor issue into a major problem, who made me feel anxious and inadequate in my own home. So when she said the relationship was over, I felt this wave of relief wash over me. I didn't have to try anymore. I didn't have to walk on eggshells or carefully choose my words or worry about setting her off. I didn't have to defend myself against baseless accusations or explain every move I made. It was over and I was free. A part of me genuinely wanted to thank her for finally ending something that should have been finished months earlier, something I'd been too stubborn or too hopeful or too invested to end myself. But then Megan kept talking and said, "I'm keeping the apartment since my name is on the lease," she added. She said it matter-of-factly, as if she were telling me the sky is blue or water is wet, as if it were so apparent that it didn't even need to be discussed. You need to find somewhere else to go. The confidence in her voice was unbelievable. She wasn't asking or suggesting. She was informing me of how this was going to go. I watched her sitting there, and I could see exactly what she was thinking. She expected me to pack up my clothes, toiletries, and personal items and leave everything else behind. She thought she was going to get to keep this fully furnished apartment with everything else I'd spent over $15,000 buying. She thought she'd won. As I stood there looking at her, I was just done. Done with her games, done with her manipulation, done with being treated like I was stupid or like I didn't matter. I knew exactly what I needed to do, and I knew I had every right to do it. "You're absolutely right," I said, keeping my voice level and calm. "Your name is on the lease, so the apartment is yours. That makes perfect sense." I paused for just a second, watching her face. "I'll move out." The change in her expression was immediate and almost funny. She'd been ready for a fight. She'd probably rehearsed this whole conversation in her head, prepared for me to yell or argue or beg her to reconsider or threaten her or try to negotiate. But I just agreed with her, and she clearly didn't know what to do with that. She'd expected resistance, and instead, I'd given her exactly what she said she wanted. What Megan didn't know was that I had plans and every intention of taking everything I bought with me when I left. Every single item. Suppose Megan wanted the apartment because her name was on the lease. Okay, she could have the apartment, but she was going to get exactly what the lease entitled her to for walls, a floor, a ceiling, and whatever basic fixtures came with the place. Everything else, everything that made it livable and comfortable and pleasant, was leaving with me. I'd paid for it, I owned it, and I was taking it. Megan told me she was going to stay with friends during the move-out week to give me space to get my things together, but I knew the real reason. She was confident she'd won. She probably thought that moving all that furniture would be too much trouble, or that I'd feel guilty and leave at least some of it, or that I wouldn't actually go through with taking everything. She was going to stay away, let me move out, and then come back to celebrate her victory. The day after she left for her friend's place, I got to work. I called up 3 of my closest friends, guys who'd been telling me for months that Megan was bad news and that I needed to get out. When I explained the situation, they brought another friend with a truck. These guys were ready to help me reclaim my life, and I was grateful for their support. We started early on a Saturday morning and worked through the entire apartment. I had my receipts and photos folder open on my laptop, and we checked off each item as we loaded it. Everything that I'd paid for came with me. My friends and I made multiple trips over 3 days, moving everything into a storage unit I'd rented. I'd been quietly looking at places after a breakup. By the time we were done, that apartment looked exactly like it had the day I'd first agreed to move in, except for Megan's clothes in the closet and whatever personal items she'd had before I moved in, which wasn't much. I did one final walkthrough on that last day, took a few photos of the bare apartment, locked the door, and left my key on the kitchen counter. I was done. Megan returned a few days after I'd moved entirely out, and I wish I could have seen her face when she walked through that door. Based on what happened next, I can only imagine the shock and rage she must have felt. My phone started ringing almost immediately, call after call from her number. I was at my friend's place when the calls started coming in. I let every single one go to voicemail. Then the texts started flooding in, dozens of them, ranging from confused, "Where is everything?" to angry, "You can't just take all the furniture," to manipulative, "How could you do this to me? I thought you loved me," to threatening, "This is theft and I'm calling the police." I read through them with my friends looking over my shoulder, and we honestly couldn't help but laugh at some of them. The audacity of this woman to think she could kick me out, keep the apartment, expect to keep all my belongings, and then act like I was the one doing something wrong. It was almost impressive. But I didn't respond to any of the messages. I knew that engaging would only give her ammunition and drag me back into her drama, and I was done with that chapter of my life. When I didn't respond to her calls and texts, Megan escalated. She started calling me from different numbers, probably her friends' phones, try to catch me off guard. She left voicemails that alternated between crying and screaming. She sent emails. She even tried to contact me through social media. For about a week, I dealt with this constant harassment, and finally, I'd had enough. I blocked her number, blocked her on every social media platform, and blocked any unknown numbers that tried to contact me. I needed peace, and I wasn't going to get it while she still had access to me. That's when Megan really lost it and took things public. She went on social media and posted this long, dramatic story painting me as a vindictive, cruel ex-boyfriend who had stripped her apartment bare and left her with nothing out of spite. She made it sound like we'd broken up over some minor disagreement, and I'd retaliated by stealing all our furniture. She posted pictures of the empty apartment with captions like, "This is what heartbreak looks like. And when someone shows you who they really are, believe them." She tagged mutual friends, posted in local community groups, and basically tried to turn everyone against me. And it worked, at least partially. Some of our mutual friends immediately took her side, without even hearing my side of the story. I started getting messages from people I'd considered friends, calling me petty and cruel, telling me I should be ashamed of myself, saying I'd gone too far. A few people even suggested I should return at least some of the furniture because it's the right thing to do. It was frustrating and hurtful to see people I'd known for years immediately believe her narrative, without even asking for my side of the story. But here's the thing about the truth. It has a way of coming out. Some of our mutual friends reached out to me privately to ask what actually happened. I explained the situation calmly and factually. I had moved into Megan's apartment and purchased all the furniture and appliances myself. When she broke up with me and told me to move out, I took my belongings, as was my right. I didn't take anything that belonged to her, didn't damage anything, and didn't do anything illegal or even morally wrong. I simply removed my property from a space I was no longer living in. Those friends who actually listened understood immediately. A few of them even admitted they'd seen Megan's controlling behavior during our relationship and weren't surprised things had ended this way. They started quietly sharing the truth with others, and slowly, the narrative began to shift. People started questioning Megan's story, asking why she thought she was entitled to keep someone else's belongings and pointing out that her name on the lease didn't give her ownership of my property. Meanwhile, Megan was apparently still trying to come after me legally. I got a message from a mutual friend warning me that Megan was threatening to sue me for theft and that she'd consulted with a lawyer. I wasn't worried at all because I knew she had absolutely no case. I had documentation proving I'd purchased everything. I hadn't taken anything that belonged to her, and I'd left the apartment in the same condition it was in before I moved in. Empty, but undamaged. I actually hoped she would try to take legal action because it would have been satisfying to watch her case get thrown out. But apparently, her lawyer told her the same thing I already knew. She had no grounds to sue. Without a legal leg to stand on, and with the social media narrative turning against her, Megan was left to face the reality of her situation. She was stuck in an empty apartment that she could barely afford to furnish on her own. I heard through mutual friends that she was struggling financially, buying furniture on credit, asking people if they had any old pieces they were getting rid of, and shopping at thrift stores, trying to make it work. As for me, I moved on with my life in the best way possible. My new apartment was smaller, but it was mine. I arranged all my furniture exactly how I wanted it, without anyone criticizing my choices or trying to control how I lived. I spent more time with my family and focused on my career and hobbies. For the first time in over a year, I felt like I could breathe. The whole experience taught me some valuable lessons about relationships, boundaries, and self-respect. I learned that love isn't supposed to feel like walking on eggshells. I learned that someone who truly cares about you won't try to control or manipulate you. I learned that it's okay to walk away from something you've invested in when it's no longer serving you. And I learned that standing up for yourself and protecting your interests doesn't make you vindictive or cruel. It makes you smart. Looking back now, I don't regret a single decision I made during that move-out week. Some people might think I should have left some furniture or that I was being petty by taking everything. But I disagree entirely. Megan made her choice when she decided to end our relationship and keep the apartment. She had every right to do that, just like I had every right to take my belongings with me. If she'd wanted to keep the furniture, she should have either bought it herself or treated me with enough respect that I'd have liked to leave it for her. But she didn't, and actions have consequences. The truth is, that empty apartment was the perfect metaphor for our entire relationship. It looked good on the surface, but it was hollow inside, built on my investment. At the same time, she contributed the bare minimum and expected to reap all the benefits. When I removed my contributions, all that was left was the reality of what she'd actually brought to the table. 4 empty walls and a lease in her name. I hope Megan learned something from this experience, though I doubt it. People like that rarely take responsibility for their own behavior. They're always the victim in their own story, always finding someone else to blame for their problems. But that's not my concern anymore. So if you're in a situation where someone is trying to manipulate you, control you, or take advantage of you, remember this story. Remember that you have the right to protect yourself and your interests. Remember that walking away doesn't make you the bad guy, and taking what's yours doesn't make you vindictive. It makes you someone who knows their worth and refuses to be taken advantage of. And if you're like Megan and you're hearing the story, I hope these 4 empty walls taught you something about respect, partnership, and what happens when you treat people like they're disposable. You wanted the apartment? You got it. Enjoy.